Like, you just want to keep going ahead?
Special assistant. If you need special assistance to participate in this meeting, please contact Tomas Santoyo Velasquez, yeah, at tsantoyo@brisbaneca.org or at telephone 415-508-2100. Notification in advance of the meeting will enable the city to make reasonable arrangements to ensure accessibility to this meeting. Okay. We're ready to start the meeting then. If we could have roll call, or I called the meeting to order. If we could have roll call then. There we go.
Cabrera,
Here.
Detmer,
Linda?
I
Which is me.
always do that. Apologies. I'm here.
Painter,
Here.
and Wozniak.
Here.
Okay. All committee members are present. Let's move on to adoption of the agenda. Could I have a motion to adopt the agenda as it was distributed? Or are there any changes, corrections to it?
I'll make a motion to adopt the agenda.
I'll second that.
Could we have a roll call vote then?
Cabrera,
All right.
Detmer,
Aye.
Painter,
Aye.
and Wozniak.
Aye.
Okay. Are there any oral communications, any members of the public present?
Nothing on my end yet.
Okay, all right. Let's move on then to approval of the minutes. I assume everybody did receive the minutes. Before we move into approval, were there any changes, corrections to the minutes that were distributed? No? Okay. Could I have a motion then to approve the minutes of our last meeting on June 1st, 2022?
I move to approve the minutes.
Second.
I'll second
You
that.
second the motion.
Your
We
choice,
have-
Tomas. Roll call. Cabrera,
Here. Aye.
Detmer,
Aye.
Painter,
Aye.
and Wozniak.
Aye.
Okay. Great. Do we have our new committee member yet, Karen?
I was gonna mention during staff updates, but council did interview one member and it is on their agenda, whatever the resolution, to appoint them tomorrow night. And then
Okay.
Ingrid will have to swear that person in, and staff will do a little orientation, and then they should be able to come to our next meeting.
Great. Okay, so, but not here tonight, not here yet. Okay, but looking forward to them joining. Why don't we then move on to our old business, which is the investigation of residential parking permit program for Central Brisbane. I think we have a few holdover items that we put on our to-do list at the end of the last meeting. And that was to investigate two additional cities, Redwood City and San Francisco. And I think we should probably go through those like we did the other cities so that we have a chance to discuss and look at them. Can we get those on? And let's see, did we cover all the other cities? I think we did, right? Were there any other cities we did not cover that were on the list?
Yeah, the ones per June, I think we covered them all, the ones that were assigned or for that meeting.
I thought you got a
Okay.
little bit of feedback from Christian on some of
Oh,
the
yeah, I
other.
guess we can open that once we open some of these other ones as well.
And then at some point, I have a small update on San Bruno, so I can give that.
Okay,
Wait, it might be. No, I think it's on the SharePoint because I was trying to start using the SharePoint.
Huh.
Get that.
Okay. Can you zoom in a tad?
Yeah, let me see.
If not, that's okay. I think I did this city, so why don't I walk through it? This was Redwood City, and I think we added this one because Commander Garcia suggested that they were using, or they were fairly far along in implementing a parking permit program in terms of San Mateo County. But to be honest with you, I did not find a whole lot of information as it applied to residential areas other than those that were affected by business overflow parking. So it applies, their parking permit program applies to 4 areas. One or two are in the downtown area, on the east side of El Camino, and then the remainder is on the more residential area, but on the west side, and still due to business and I think there might be a school overflow parking that ends up on the street all day. Residents can initiate a program. They can request a program be initiated in their area. There were no details, but it is by petition, so I'm sure it has to have a majority like the other cities do. The maximum number of permits is not, the maximum number of permits is how it's determined. They don't state. The number of permits per household is 3 permits per address, and ADUs are not specified in terms of a separate address. So I took that to mean that if a property had an ADU on it, that the 3 permits would need to be shared with the ADU and the primary dwelling as well. There's no cost to the residents for the program. For guest permits that can get up to 10 24-hour permits per year per address, again, at no cost. The permits are vehicle specific, which means you have to produce your registration showing that the vehicle is registered at that address in order to get a permit. And then it's only effective during the daytimes on weekdays, Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. Car can be parked a maximum, permitted car can be parked a maximum of 72 hours, which I think is standard law. A non-permitted car can park for 2 hours. So they do allow parking by non-permitted cars, but the time is limited. Again, I think this is more targeted at business overflow, business district overflow. And they enforce it by having a sticker. There's a sticker that they put on the left rear bumper so that a car, an enforcement vehicle coming down the street could see those as it drives down the roadway. Funding is not specified. So, but since there is no cost for a permit, this would have to be entirely funded out of their city budget. And I think that was everything on Redwood City. Any comments or questions? Okay. We also, Darius, did you have a chance to look at San Francisco?
I did, and I did send that over. I'm wondering if maybe it's in my folder rather than the new city folder on SharePoint. I think I saw it there somewhere the other day. So I think it is there. It might just be in the my research folder rather than the new city research folder. But we could probably pull that up.
All right, let me see. So you think it's in the SharePoint?
I think it's in SharePoint under Darius's research, and then there's one that says like SF. I believe it was like June 5th. It's like right after our last meeting.
Okay.
I think I saw it migrated there.
He emailed it on June 5th, so that's another way to maybe.
It
find
is in there. I just saw it on my own computer. I think mine's probably just loading a little faster. If you go to documents, under documents, you can see Darius's documents, and then it'd be under there. I just checked it a second ago. Looks like you guys are still having some internet issues in City Hall then?
This is at my house, but
Ah.
yeah, it's going on really slow right now.
It was also emailed, I guess, yeah. And then if you go to the, parking permit project, and then my folder. And I guess while that starts getting loaded, I mean, I could just verbally start, perhaps. Let me see as long as it. And it probably is that first one, yeah. That's probably the one. All right, so I looked into San Francisco as mentioned, and sort of, given that it's a quite larger city with about 800,000 people, they have sort of different zones with residential parking permits. And it is sort of by neighborhood and by the different districts that you kind of see in this map. And I wanted to include the map because some districts, obviously the size of the districts vary quite a bit by neighborhood, and then as well as sort of the maximum number of permits per household also changes sort of by area, probably due to sort of the density of the streets or perhaps the the topography of the area there. So I'll point those out as we kind of go through this stuff. So like I said, I think these were sort of just assigned parking areas. So I don't think it was initiated by the citizens. I think it's just sort of by the city was determined. So you can sort of see on the west side of the city, there's not much of a parking permit, more sort of in the business districts, or on the north side where it's a little bit more busy. Similarly, sort of like in Bernal or the other neighborhoods sort of in the southeast, you also don't see a parking permit there. Again, I didn't really find specifics on how they determine the maximum parking spots, but it is sort of limited in that some of them have the smallest zones are limited to only 2 per household, whereas the larger zones are allowed 4. Right, and so it's basically 4 permits per active residential household, except for in any of the units mentioned as AA, EE, and HV. And again, those are sort of little neighborhoods that perhaps is just in that neighborhood, and they tend to be quite small districts. So I don't know if that was maybe just number of spots is just limited in that neighborhood. I didn't quite look into that. Another interesting feature is that the driver must be listed on the insurance policy with matching the resident's home. And then, of course, they could have a second permit. So only 1 permit per person, but then a second permit for a motorcycle or other vehicle was allowed. And then, again, sort of the cost. So it was a $160 annual fee per resident, regardless of sort of the zone or district, and then $119 for the motorcycles. Temporary permits you could buy, and each address could purchase up to 20 of those one-day permits. And a cumulative of 32 weeks of weekly permits per year. So quite a few there, but those can't go towards cars that are registered within the city. They have to be sort of other, or I guess not at that address rather. And then, yes, they are vehicle specific, so they are linked to the address and the insurance, and the times of effect are 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday, so sort of the standard business hours. And then, so I couldn't really find the details of the maximum time. All it said was sort of that, unless it was 2 hour, you couldn't park there. The city is now moving towards the sort of digital system. So moving forward, all new people will not have an actual physical permit, as it says. They're just going to be sort of by plate readers. So they're moving forward with that system. And so any renewals and such have no physical stickers anymore. Except for, I guess there's a few, including the caregiver, city business contractor short term, which are special types of permits that they have that kind of go outside of this. Those will still have physical permits. So teachers, for example, could apply for permits within a residential zone. But otherwise, that's sort of the breakdown within these zones, of how they enforce in the city. And then the link is just sort of to the general website with more details there. Yeah. Any questions on that I can potentially address?
Thank you.
Patrick, you're muted.
In the map view at the beginning, you had several codes on the map. What did
Yes.
those mean again?
So those are the different residential areas. So for example, area AA and EE being maybe Hunters Point there, if you look, and that's sort of maybe a little bit north of Hunters Point. That area, I guess, is limited to the number of permits per residence. Otherwise, these are just different zones. So you would have a permit for A zone or C zone or whichever zone you live in, and you'd only have a permit for that zone.
Okay, okay.
Of course, you could park in the non-zoned area outside of that, essentially.
Looked at San Francisco a little bit today too, and that you can get you can apply for an exception. Is it if you need more permits than the number?
Yes, yeah, and exactly. So I think there's an exception where, and there's a note on that, and there's if there's additional drivers, so it says each permit over the subject to being charged. I guess it's double the cost of the RPP permit program. So I guess if there's additional drivers, more than just the sort of 2 permits per household that are allowed in those areas, you could try to file for an exception. And I guess they didn't specify what paperwork would be needed there or whatnot, but that it could be up to an additional double the cost fee, maybe an additional, $300 for a secondary permit then.
Yeah, the number I lived in Cow Hollow and had a
Mhm.
I guess I had a parking permit, yeah, some of the time, and like a 15-unit apartment building maybe had 100 feet of frontage, and it was all there were garages, so under this program I guess they could issue 60, but there weren't any parking spaces along the frontage of that apartment building. Yeah, like a couple maybe. So they definitely did not. I mean, to some degree, they consider the capacity, I guess, on these smaller streets, but
Not
I think
much,
it's, I think it's a challenge. You don't, even if you want to look at capacity, you don't want to issue the exact number of permits per the capacity because people could be out of town and then you've got empty spaces on the street, So look at capacity, you've got to kind of figure out what the relationship is. And you want to issue.
I have a question. There's so much data involved in each city. I'm wondering if we're working on a spreadsheet, kind of accumulate the differences or the similarities from each town. Do we have that in progress?
Tomas put together not so much a spreadsheet, but kind of boiled things down into a Word document and more put it as thoughts for us to consider, and I think he pulled in kind of what all the different cities were doing and under each topic. And I thought maybe we might go through that tonight once we've, start going through that. There's a lot there and we may not get through all of it, but I think it might help inform us to start thinking about what our recommendations might be in each of these areas.
Yeah, I think if we can look at them and study them, it'd be easier.
Yeah, let me share right now.
So
Yeah,
I have a question. In terms of condominiums or apartment buildings, I'm not sure if you mentioned how the city managed those.
Yes, I guess it's I have it there listed there, and basically it's an active annual resident permit is issued to a single household, which is defined as a single mailing address. So apartments on one building count as separate households. So it's by mailing address they would then do it. So each unit then could have up to 4. Actually there.
Wow, interesting.
Unless it's in the
Okay,
AA
yeah.
or EE, in which case they're limited to 2 per household.
Oh, they do. So where are the two lower permit areas in more denser parts of the city?
Right. So that's what I was trying to look at. It's the zone EE and AA, and the EE seems to be sort of, I guess,
Maybe a
in
dog
Mission Bay,
patch.
right by,
Yeah.
yeah, right by the stadium potentially. So then there might be something to do to there. And then AA, and zoom in there a little bit, is sort of, I don't know if that's Bernal or sort of in that right by Cesar Chavez. So I'm not sure about the the exact streets for that particular region.
I think
And then
that's
HV,
Cedar Park area,
yeah.
the North Slope.
And then I couldn't see the HV on this map, and I wasn't sure if it was H and a V for the last point, or they have a new zone that just wasn't updated on this map. But there was one portion that said area of HV, but I couldn't find that one on this one. So I might just be H and V as both of those. That rule applies to both.
Karen, you live in the city. Is there any buzz about fairness or unfairness that people talk about where some areas get more permits than other areas per household?
So it's too big and too anonymous,
Okay.
don't know their neighbors enough. And if a whole zone is the same, unless you're right on the border, you may not even know that that other zone only gets 2 per household, I never knew that. Actually, I got one and I lived in a studio apartment and I didn't even remember how many, but potentially I could have got 4 for my studio apartment. That seems excessive,
Well, it says with the exception of areas within those zones. I don't think it's even the entire AA or EE is limited. It's just within those zones, there might even be a sub-zoning sort of a thing as well.
I think I was in K. Anyway.
I think it's pretty cool how they have a map with the different criterias, Obviously there, it's a huge city, but even for a small place, I think having a map and different criteria will help people navigate that type of different parking permits if some of those conditions are different, which I'm sure Brisbane has those.
That's that dovetails nicely into something that we wanted to show you, but I did want to talk a little bit about San Bruno. Oh, and address what Linda said. A lot of the ones that you guys looked at were business districts, so some of them weren't even all that useful to even put into the spreadsheet. But I mean, definitely hear your point that there was a lot of data that we talked about, and it's in various formats, so there might be some need to kind of organize the ones that were relevant to look at the decision points you guys have. That's a good point.
Thank you.
I contacted San Bruno because their public works director used to work in Brisbane 12, 15 years ago. And I asked him about their parking permit program, and I got some specifics in that prior public works director, he's pretty new, he's been there less than a year, got the policy adopted, and that's all they have at this point is a policy. They have a neighborhood adjacent to Panfran, and I hadn't heard this before, but Panfran is going to be redeveloped to like biotech or something.
Yes.
So the neighbors are concerned about parking, and they're asking for a program. And I guess the street or streets that are affected border systems. Their public works director now told me is, we don't have any infrastructure. We might see if South San Francisco's program could register those permits, and that their lieutenant was the one that's been, has the institutional knowledge of developing program to the state that it is. And I did contact Commander Garcia, and he knows the lieutenant at San Bruno, so he's going to make contact with him. Right now they enforce on the parking meters, and I guess there was some kind of ruling about chalking cars, so they're going to license plate readers also, and they're looking at using this contractor Lark to do the meters, and then to do, if they had a neighborhood program, to also do that. So they're in their infancy too, in terms of like having a program and being able to tell us how it works and what the issues are with it. So there wasn't a lot of great information there. So I did wander over to South San Francisco's, and they're using a contractor to issue permits. It's ILPIPL, something like that. So there's a website, but their parking permits, wasn't clear if they're residential or commercial, but they're for a couple of garages and parking lots. And you can get one for a month or for 3 months. So it probably is for people that are, I guess it could be neighbors that live in the area, but it might be for people that are coming in and working in South San Francisco. I didn't look up the locations. So they don't have daily, daily street parking. These are for particular lots where they're trying to manage who parks there, not on a daily basis, but on a monthly or quarterly basis. But they do have the infrastructure that we could find out the price. If you want a permit, you just, that contractor that does that has about 20 or so cities throughout the nation that they issue permits for.
I'm wondering, I think this came up at our last meeting as well. To listen to one of these service providers, I think would be beneficial to us in the sense of what has worked, what hasn't worked. I'm not looking for a presentation of a program for Brisbane, but rather what is the knowledge that has been gained from someone who has implemented many of these in a variety of cities. What are the problems? What has, for instance, what has turned out to be best in terms of determining how many permits per resident? Is it static in a city? Is it variable, like San Francisco, things like that? I still think it would be valuable for us if we could hear from someone like that, could come to one of our meetings.
So I'm not sure that those contractors do that. It really felt like if we wanted to hire them, we would say, this is what you issue, this is what the cost is, you program it into your website, and when someone goes in to buy one, those parameters then help to issue them that permit. I don't think that they have any, I don't think that they're that type. They're more like a contractor than a consultant. They're not providing expertise. I mean, I can check, I will follow up, but that wasn't the
Could you
same.
check? I think that, yeah, let's check. Yeah. And I mean, because you're right, they may not be the originator of the policies that are in place in various cities, but they have seen the policies and worked with them. And
It's a real basic, I don't know if, you could try to pull it up, Tomas, at City of South San Francisco residential parking permit. It goes to, it's like input your city, input what you want. Not very, pretty simple.
But-
It's like buying a ticket to a show or something,
Yeah, my understanding from Commander Garcia was that some of these contract firms, they pretty much are vertically integrated. They do a host, they cast a pretty big service on this type of need, from enforcement, different management, and very versatile nowadays with the technology and et cetera, et cetera. So there might be different type of contractors, but they're probably the ones that that they do a lot of it. They take that away from the cities, especially like cities like Brisbane, that he was saying that it would be very difficult for them to hire somebody and to implement it here from scratch. So that's what I gathered from him.
Mhm.
right away. So this was one company that issues. So then if we decided we had a program for all of the residential public streets in Brisbane, it could be done at the court counter, the city manager's office, in the police department, or you could have, we've turned over our business licenses to a contractor. You apply online, you get the business license, and we get the data and collect fees. So it would be something like that where, okay, if you want a permit, park on the street, go to this website and you pay this fee and you issue a permit, and then you don't have to have staff that, And Mario did say that, Commander Garcia did say that about the enforcement piece. If you use a contractor and then the program changes, then you can, you haven't hired several full-time staff people or
Mhm.
want to do whatever that then you may not need or you may need more of. Just contractor has to figure out how to supply that.
Do you know, I guess in this case, Karen, whether the contractor also supplies, like the contractor for South City, were they also going to be supplying enforcement, or is that?
Yeah, it just did not. I
It's just a
can't
portal.
find it now,
Yeah.
but it was just a portal.
I just saw it. I'll try logging on. I could see what you're talking about. I think it was called the enforcement portal, the permitportal.com. But yeah.
Linda, any thoughts?
No, listening, taking it all in. I can see where Brisbane, it could be divided up into areas like San Francisco because there's more impacted areas than others. Just thinking about that. Something to think about. Thanks.
All right. Shall we move on then to the document, the Word document that Tomas put together, kind of synthesizing everything?
Yeah, and one more thing is that when you looked at the zones in San Francisco, I asked him to just do a first draft of zones in case that was an approach that you guys wanted. It would be something that then you could comment on. But maybe that's not the first thing to look at. Maybe they'll just pick first.
Okay. Good.
Mhm.
Okay. Tomas, do you want to run through this for us? We can talk about it as we go.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, basically like what Patrick was basically saying, it's just through all our research, kind of what we figured that we must consider in every category of a parking permit program. So I'll just start at the top with permit costs and program administration expense. These are just some of through our research, some of the things that other cities would be doing. So we would have permit base fees for all the program administrative costs, either permit fees as well as citation fees. Permit fees are nominal, permits are no cost, like we just saw in Redwood City, I believe. And fines for parking violations remain as per the code existing, or fines in the Muni code are increased. And then this one just kind of talks about. We'll talk about it.
Let's just talk about the first section first.
Okay.
Go back up to the top.
Yeah, so I guess I'll make a general comment, and this is probably more of a organization of the data, and I don't know how difficult that will be at this point. But if it would probably have helped to have like in parentheses the city, because then you could follow the different cities and have an idea, connect the dots and have an idea what they did. But overall, I think this summary is very comprehensive and it's very good, and it's going to provide us with a lot of information that we need and that we research.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Linda?
I am not in agreement with that. I think the information is the thing we're really interested in. The cities are not going to make a difference because we're trying to figure this out for Brisbane, which is very unique. I like having all of the different possibilities listed, and I immediately find myself gravitating to one or the other. So just my opinion. Thank you.
Okay. Any thoughts, Darius?
No, I like this quite a bit. I'm sort of in a similar boat with Linda in terms of I like the idea of laid out. There's one or two here that I hadn't thought about as I'm through these, but I think, so far, kind of going through it and marinating.
Okay. Yeah, I'll continue then with the number of permits.
No, well, what I thought we might do is let's
Into it.
let's have a discussion of permit costs. I mean, we might have done this in a little different order because, but that's okay. Let's go through this from top to bottom. We may not get through it in one meeting, and that's okay. But I think let's have a discussion on these issues of permit costs and at least formulate some thoughts in our mind what we might be recommending to council if we get to the point of recommending a permit program, how it might be funded. Because, the service company, assuming that we would go that way, there's a cost with that, and I imagine there are different ways of paying for that in terms of just a flat annual fee per year, or like what Millbrae did with their stoplight cameras. They paid for it with each violation, which was the wrong way to do things, but still, it was initially very cheap for the city to implement. And so I thought we might just talk about these a little bit. I don't know, we are a small city. I don't know if it's realistic that a program would be self-supporting or not. Maybe Karen, you have better knowledge of what that might entail or what might occur there. Or
I think I just sent you guys, not to interrupt the meeting, but the link to the South San Francisco site. I think that's a point, is to contact them and see what their fee is to do so. I mean, that would be something, what does our business license online portal cost us, because we're collecting and fees for people to get a business license to do work in town. So how does that, what that's the finance department from their perspective, would they encourage us to be revenue neutral, and what would that look like? I mean, I think if you asked me, recent budget presentations by the city seem to indicate that they probably wouldn't want to find a whole bunch of new funds to run this program, because I think if you use the city budget, this program is for Central Brisbane. It's not for all of the residents in the city. But, is that what the committee would want to recommend, that the users are paying for it by the permit fee, or at least paying for part of it, or do we really want, like, people are going to be somewhat unhappy and we want it to be free to get a permit and find the funds a different way? I mean, I think that's kind of what, and again, so this part is for residential. We got residential, and then we've got a couple of maybe commercial areas that are going to be different. So I think we're talking about residential first, unless you want to do both in parallel.
Okay. Any thoughts?
Yeah, so I mean, those are good points. I don't know if I understood your question, Pat. So you're asking if, what are we inclining, if it's something that we feel the city, can run this program, or because some of the feedback we received from Commander Garcia, most likely we're going to go the route of doing, contract a company that they do this, right?
That
so
was
either
for
way,
the enforcement side. There's still the permit management. You go up, you either go into an office or you go to a portal and you show your proof of residency, and you get.
Yeah, I'll get to that in a bit.
Well, right, but
So,
he wasn't talking about that piece, but he was only talking about the enforcement piece.
Which is the side he knew. Yeah.
Well, I gathered the question differently, and wanted, be able to develop my thought. So I guess, that's the way I see, that's one real question. But I do have a business, and I understand what you're saying in terms of, processing the license itself. That is just a, that's a website that you go and pay for it. It's probably a straightforward thing to do, but when it comes to, to a residential parking permit with a lot of other components, that we have been talking about here, and I just probably mentioned some of them, like, guest parking, then you got the business parking, and then you got, how you can issue the et cetera, et cetera. So so my point with that is that enforcement has to be tied with it, and then you have other. So it would make sense, or it's very tight with the enforcement of it. So if you're gonna issue just a parking permit, which sounds like the city is moving away from that, and it's going to have. San Francisco's moving away from that, and it's going to have plate readers. So there's that technology, to allow that you might not even need a parking sticker, So then, so I think the enforcement part, plays a big part of it, and then having like a map that the city has with the different zoning, and then issuing the different amount of parking per in dwelling and all that. That's going to be a very comprehensive exercise to get to the point, and obviously somebody's going to have to pay for it. So I guess that's my understanding, and to talk about the cost, and to Pat comment in terms of there are some contract businesses that they have a revenue structure that sometimes they could abuse the citizens, because their revenue structure is to either put more ticket or something like that. Like in the case of the street lights, there are some contractors that they do that they ticket the people that run the red light, and sometimes those sensors are very sensitive. So in this case, if the contractor is going to get money for the people that they're ticketing, that they don't have a parking permit or stuff like that, we just have to be careful that the incentive is not the wrong one.
Thank you, Christian. Any other thoughts on the committee?
I have some, in response to Christian, I think that there's always a way for abuses to happen in any program. And that's certainly not something we want to see, but I'm not really sure how we would set limitations for that not to happen at this point. My sense about the cost is that I don't want our city to have to pay for any of it if possible. I like the idea of having a portal for people to go through. That's really simple, really easy. If we do get, and I think we are getting the license plate reader, Karen, correct me if I'm wrong.
I think they're investigating that.
Okay.
But I believe that's the plan.
Yeah. That was my understanding, that it might be a good plan that might be coming in soon. It'd be nice if permits were no, that'd be great, but there are fees attached to it. And I really, I think like every other fee, it would be good to have it come into the city and come through a portal. The concern that I have is, will this have an effect on businesses on the main street? And how do we deal with permit for businesses who are trying to make a living? And Midtown obviously has a parking lot, so there's probably not a problem there, but I'm not sure. I guess there's a lot to digest here, and I would lean towards the permit fees paying for all of the program costs, but I'm not sure that. But thank you.
Darius, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sort of thinking, so as the more I think about this list, I guess it is quite a long list of different parameters. I'm sort of starting to wonder, how do we sort of stack rank these and start thinking about those things? And then, of course, with costs, because my concern with the sort of the cost is I just have no concept how much this could cost from both the enforcement and both aspects of it, and what sort of, is this something that even if all the permits were $100 each, would that cover the cost? I just have no concept of the scale we're talking about here. And maybe that's something we can get from from one of these vendors that could at least ballpark us how much like an annual fee or something would go for. But And then I guess the thing I keep coming back to in my mind is, are we set that we want to do a different commercial versus residential program? Is there a possibility that would be just one program? I guess, has that been, have we ironed that out as well? And I kind of keep coming back to, maybe, yeah, if there's just one or two problem areas, if you've already sort of started to think about rezoning, that might be interesting to look at also to sort of give us the, something else to chew on.
Thank you. Some thoughts that I have. Aaron, we don't know yet what South City is paying, right? But you can find out, get an idea or something.
What they're paying to that contractor, yeah.
Okay. And then I guess, do you know what, like when there is a parking violation in town, I don't know how many our police department might issue per year, but do you know how much a violation is? How much that fee is when a car is?
It's a lot less than San Francisco. My memory once, I know that we used to ticket for street sweeping on visitation just during the street sweeping time, and I thought it was like $35.
That's pretty reasonable.
I mean, I got one for had parked on the restaurant. I think it was like 100 and something. But but then there's other ones, like if your license plates expire, like that's like $70. But in terms of I think our scope is, from what I gather, is mainly residential, but obviously we have to consider other things. But in terms of commercial, the way I seen that handle is a lot of it through just meters, and then just having clear marks on the street if you're, on a red zone, or there's a fire hydrant and stuff like that. So that that's an idea, just have like straightforward meters, and then you could play around with the different time that you will enforce that meter.
Can I add something on that? I think a little bit of what some of the commercial ones get at is, I think there's two things, right? That those people visiting those businesses aren't taking neighborhood parking, but also if you just have meters and then everywhere else was a residential parking zone, then what about people that work at those businesses that come in during the day? Is there some accommodation for them, or are we not accommodating them and they should all take public transit? I think those are things that
That's a good point. I'm not sure where people who work on, say, visitation park, because a lot of times there's plenty of parking, and at other times there's absolutely none, when you try and park there. But,
I'm sorry, are there currently no restrictions on parking there, or is there some 2-hour limitations in some areas of the station?
So I think Commander Garcia talked about this last time, because I noted it in the minutes. I think it was was written down as 24, but he was talking about 2. So visitation has signs that say 2-hour parking, but he said it's only enforced on a complaint basis. So if a business has a problem, they can get a car to move. There are a couple, there's a couple that are maybe striped 24 minutes, I think, in front of the deli. And then we previously would ticket during the street sweeping time, but it was 3 to 6 a.m. So it wasn't when the businesses were.
Right. I guess my thoughts on permitting costs and the cost of the program. This is a quandary, because you look at what other cities are doing. Let's start with the cost of the permit. Some of them charge nothing. Some of them, San Francisco, I think, was the highest at $160. That's frankly a lot of money, right? And for a lot of people. And if somebody has a couple cars, you're up to $320 every year for a household, which I think is a lot. But if we're not charging for it, then it's got to come out of the city's general fund, which is also limited, right? So, I don't know if we're going to actually be able to make these recommendations on this. This is an item for city council, understands the budget and all, but I think we can put in comments about impact on people's ability to pay and so on and so forth. You know, the other side of this is the cost of the permit cheaper than a ticket? So Christian mentioned something $35. Well, if you've got a $160 permit, well, I can get, you know, 6 tickets before I paid for a permit, you know, right? I mean, and a lot of people think of things that way. So this is a hard one, but I think if we can get some information from South City on what their program costs, I think that would help us to understand what our costs might be here. Any other thoughts, comments on the administrative expense of this, permitting cost?
I do, Patrick, and I completely agree with you about if the cost is too high, it's going to create a big burden for some people, particularly people on fixed incomes, lower income families, the people who are dependent on goods and services from the county. And there are some of those in town. Of course, we don't want to invade anybody's privacy, but if they're required to have that, will there be some kind of an offset that we can offer them, or a sliding scale, or
I feel
maybe
like
waive the fees?
this came up quite a while back, and from my limited knowledge, not being in the finance department, that if someone qualifies for the PG&E, you know, differential, it's
Lower
like
rate?
repairs
Yeah.
or whatever, they go qualify for that and they bring that to Brisbane. I think they get better rate maybe for their water and sewer costs. So I don't know if we saw that. If you saw anything in San Francisco, Darius? I didn't I don't remember. I just skimmed
Not
it. But
explicitly. No.
we could probably parallel that. Qualify for that program, you get this rate instead, you know, and then you built in some
Okay.
social justice to it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There
I
are some
think,
fine points to this that need to be looked at.
Yes. Okay, why don't we move on to an issue that I think is really important is how do you determine the number of permits to be issued? Tomas, you want to walk us through that? What?
Yeah, I'll just read through real quick. So starting with the one option is fixed number per household regardless of existing on-site parking or street capacity. I definitely saw that somewhere in one of the research items, like I don't recall which city, but that was one I recall a lot. Determine fixed number 2, 3, 4, other. Number of permits depends upon the on-site parking at that address in particular. So I mean, obviously it would depend across homes in an area. Number of permits depends upon street capacity per block. Number of permits depends upon street capacity per zone. So then that would be like self-defined. That's more of one that would go towards the public. Number of permits depends upon street capacity in all of central Brisbane. That's looking bigger picture. And then max number of permits relates to number of dwelling units.
Committee, any thoughts?
Like, the one that strikes me immediately as sort of too much perhaps work or might be too difficult is the on-site parking at a particular address or property. I just don't know how, you know, we'd be able to quickly assess that and sort of distribute the number of permits there and then also manage that. Obviously the company could do some of that, but that strikes me as a little too complex perhaps. Yeah, I mean, I come back to sort of San Francisco where they just seem to lock it in sort of arbitrary, or not arbitrary, but like 4 per, you know, per or household. And where they define it as an address being a house, right? And I guess are ADUs, do they have their own address typically, or ADUs have the address that's added onto like a sub address of the unit? Does anyone know that?
You know, I once lived in the Sunset in what's called a mother-in-law apartment, where they finished behind the garage. You know, it's a 1-car tandem garage, right? And in the back of the house, you can finish it. So it was on Taravell Street, and I forget what the number was, but they just put a letter behind it, like 1905 A. A was my address, and it was put on the front, on the door with a mail slot. So
Mhm.
I bet that's how they do it.
I guess there's something else we've talked about as well in terms of we have a sense of capacity within Brisbane. And I don't know if we've done that sort of analysis in the past or not, or if that's something that we want to. Yeah.
And I said last time that I would look into what we did, and I didn't find very much in the files, but our former transportation engineer, Justin, figured out, counted, measured the capacity of the 6 streets that we studied for, to see how full, to come up with whether they were 90% or 100% full or whatever the number was during the time of the study. So using, I can get that. I didn't get it before, but using some standard for a parking space length and looking at Google Street View and seeing, measuring each one, that's exhaustive. And yeah. I appreciate the point. One of the things about, I'd heard the concept floated of, if you have off-street parking, if you have a 2-car garage, 2 driveway spaces, you should get less permits. But all of that can change. Somebody, like, you got to track that. You could, even if you did the exhaustive research once, somebody builds something different, and just it seems challenging to go measure all of that, the off-street. But
Karen,
it's
what
relevant.
happens for new residential building permits in Brisbane? Aren't a certain number of parking spaces required to be built, or a certain size garage these today on new build out?
New or like a significant change, because there aren't that many empty lots really. But yeah, there are definitely zoning, parking and zoning code that the planning department reviews and before issuing permits. But there aren't a lot of empty lots. There's not a lot of infill development.
Okay. Because I remember seeing that at different council meetings where they went into great depth about, well, how many, someplace way up on the hill, like on Kings or something, and was there enough parking in the plan and all of that, even though it was just a permit. For some reason it needed a variance or something, and it came to council for approval. Any other thoughts from the committee on how to set number of permit?
Yeah,
I think it's like,
you want to go ahead, Linda?
no, go on, Christian.
Why don't we raise hands? Well, let's start raising hands as we go along. Yeah, and I'll try and keep an eye on that. Go ahead, Kristen.
So I find that one number of permits depend upon street capacity per zone to be interesting, because you're going to have those apartment buildings that you need to figure out how is that going to play out. But then you're going to have situations like where I live, that like I live in Mariposa, but then you have the other street, Solano, and there's always parking over there. So then you sort of to tap into that. But then you're going to have some people like the people that live in King Road, that there's no parking either way, right? So I think that that one with the zoning, that that sort of gives you more flexibility how to manage those different conditions that this town for sure has. So that one, I think that one is interesting. But the other question about if you have a garage, right? Because that I'm assuming we're going to provide some information for council, and then they have to flush it out with legal. But if you have a garage, you don't need a parking. Like you, Pat, you don't need you put your car in your garage. And I don't have a garage, so I'm going to need a parking sticker. Those people don't need a parking sticker, right? And that's going to be an incentive for them to clean their garage and stick their car in their garage. But do they technically need a parking permit?
They would only need it to park on the street. They wanted to park on the street.
Yeah. But if they don't, they could use their garage. And how about the people that are parking in front of their driveway? That's street property, right?
Yeah, did you, it's not Darius, how do you say it?
Darius, both are good. Yeah, I mean, it's either or.
Did you notice that in San Francisco, sorry, I just jumped in that, that I saw a little clause that if you park in your driveway and you don't go beyond the driveway cut at all, I think you can do that without permit. If it's a building with 2 or less addresses.
Yeah, you can block your own. Yeah, as long as it's not a.
As long as
I
it's
think
not-
the
If it sticks out over the curb a little bit, then you need a permit to park.
I think there's a permit. Yeah, yeah. But there is some. Yeah, I didn't see too much in detail about within the kind of permit parking program necessarily, but I have heard of that as well in terms of just street parking and sort of that, the back
I
end that you
saw
can
that
block your own. But yeah, we have
Particularly
to
in the
maybe
program, they
look a little
talk.
closer there.
Yeah.
But I guess
Linda, did you have some comments? Go ahead. Linda?
Oh, me?
that.
Okay. This is like spaghetti. There's a lot here to take into consideration. A lot of people have garages that are full. We can't force them to empty them and use their garage, nor would that be fair. However, if they're going to block a sidewalk or take a street parking place, I think we have to remember the priority of safe pedestrian walkways. And there's a lot of sidewalks blocked right now, which is kind of frustrating for me to see, but I'm only one person. I think we need to sit down and have just an entire, maybe people respond and put down all of our ideas about each one of these number of permit things, because there's so much to discuss here, and there are so many, what about this, and what about that? Some people don't have parking at all. Some people have it, don't use it. Like I said, it's spaghetti. So in order to be fair to everyone, how do we do this? And I just think we need to make this kind of a separate, a separate focus where we spend some time individually looking at these. And if Tomas will send this out, I don't have it, then I can look at it and kind of think about each one of these items. And if everybody else can do that, maybe we can come up with some consensus about how to figure out the number of permits for each property. And there's going to be special circumstances. So I think that all needs to be thought about also. Thank you.
Thank you. Darius, did you have some more comments? I'm sorry.
You're on mute, Darius.
Feel that, Linda. Question.
Oops.
Okay,
Lost-
you're muted now.
Come back, Darius.
1 second. I'm having some technical difficulties here. Oh. You hear me now? Or is this?
We can hear you. We can see you and hear you now.
Okay, sorry. I don't know. My stuff must have glitched for a second. I was just saying, with regards, I love the idea, Linda, in terms of going through and sort of spending some effort. Were you thinking about like going through and just commenting, or actually maybe ranking the top choices within the category that we think, or sort of how are you thinking about we can each add to this without then blowing it up?
Both, I think, would be helpful. I really only thought about commenting, but if ranking helps, I think that's a great idea. I mean, I also think ranking on permit costs is a great idea. And maybe with some commentary on that, we might want to do that on this entire screen that Tomas prepared. It would be some good homework to accomplish before our next meeting. This is not going to be easy or fast. All input is important on this. It's going to affect a lot of people. We're going to upset a lot of people, and there might be some that are happy with it. But parking is a real difficult issue to deal with.
Yes, it is. Thank you. I think that's a good idea to do some ranking on our own. I think it's also valuable for us to discuss it before our ranking and then rank it and then discuss again after our ranking, you know.
Good
'cause,
idea.
I don't know. I have some thoughts and comments, but I wanted anybody else to comment first on this section, make sure everybody's had their chance to say what they wanted to say regarding number of permits. So I guess I on number of permits, I'm going through a little bit of a transition, or I'm between two places, in the sense that I think if we're a small enough city, and I think in central Brisbane or Old Town, the parking problem is widespread enough that if we gave different numbers of permit to different parts of town, I think that would be create unhappiness among the people who got fewer permits per dwelling. Because I don't live in that part of town, but somebody's somebody's battery is about to die, whoever has got the on screen.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
thank
me.
you. I got it, thanks.
Okay, there we go. Okay. So, you know, I've always kind of gone to this thing, it's one program fits everybody. Because the problem, as I see it, from the parking survey that we did, it's just kind of everywhere in central Brisbane. That's been my impression. There isn't any place that's significantly better than any place else in terms of street parking from what I have seen. However, as I read this, one thing that pops out at me that I like is that if you've got a garage, whether it's full or not, you have the ability to park off the street one way or another, and maybe those buildings, those dwellings get less permits than the ones that were constructed without a garage, because we have both in town. And you know, I'm coming, so you know, Linda, I know you said maybe that's not fair, and I know what you're thinking there, and I agree with that, but I'm coming back to what is the mind of council here, in that when they had their council meeting discussion directing us to do this, one of the comments I think that came up several times is that there are people with garages full. There are people with garages full, and okay, so why not give them an incentive to empty it? It's not a requirement. It's not a mandatory, you must empty your garage, but if you don't want to pay a parking permit, then empty your garage. You know, maybe that's a way to do this. Linda?
Patrick, I never meant to excuse the people who store tons of stuff in their garage that they don't use. I don't even remember what I said about that, but it was never my intention to insinuate that they should be given any special treatment. If they choose to fill their garage and not use that for parking as intended, and it can be used or utilized for parking, some garages just don't work.
Right.
Then I think they need to pay for a permit to be on the street and store their, it's like a storage fee. Yes.
Yes.
I agree with you.
I mean, you know, to rent a store, I've never rented storage in California. I've had them in Colorado and other cities I've lived in. You know, I don't know what they cost here, but I imagine it's pretty pricey, like the one over on Carter across the hill from us. There's that storage place. I imagine it's pretty expensive, but it is accessible, you know.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot more than that permit per year, I'm sure.
Yeah, well, that's
Probably
right.
that much per month, you know?
That's right. All right. Any other thoughts on how we might approach a number of permits to issue for dwelling, or?
Have you, I don't know if this would be a good time to show draft map, but have you thought about the zone concept that San Francisco uses, and do you want to look at the map this point because it may have to do with how you carve up neighborhoods.
Sure, sure.
Have that, Tomas? Or switch around.
Yeah, one sec. It'll- difficult.
Hey, quick question, Tomas. I think I heard you mentioned that in college you either use or develop a technique to measure streets from Google Map or something like that.
Yeah, I did look a little bit into it once that first came up. Seems like it's pretty seems like there's definitely like some, even like almost like a formula, like an empirical formula that can be used for this kind of stuff. I didn't go much deeper into that because I didn't know how much we need at this meeting, but I mean, because it does seem like we're moving a little bit ahead, definitely like have like a concrete answer for next time we meet. But yeah, I think it's definitely very possible.
Yeah. Thanks for that. It was, just want to make sure that I heard you right.
So
I'm not
I
holding
asked,
your feet to the fire from that.
I asked Tomas to do this, and it wasn't with any particular, he probably has the least knowledge of the streets and how they work with each other and
Mhm.
what makes sense to draw lines, but this was just sort of like a starting point. Can't see this stuff on the very
Yeah,
left or
this
whatever.
image is kind of off. When I think that was just.
So
the
this is
image.
just something to get your brains working on, would you have a permit zone? And then if you got a permit in that zone, you could park anywhere in that zone. Are these, would these be big? Would these be, or do we want to just have, you get a permit, you can park anywhere in central
Mhm.
Brisbane? And remember, so the yellow are private streets. So, I was looking at what he had done, and I think the backside of San Bruno doesn't have any public parking at all. So it's kind of not part of our.
How did San Francisco determine their zones? Do we know?
I don't know that either.
Okay.
So that might be
I
something.
didn't
we
find
want.
anything about that. Yeah.
I
We
mean,
could try
something,
at this staff level to look at that. We have
Yeah.
Justin in MTA, maybe he could point me to somebody.
something that factors into this in terms of the size of a zone is how far is a person willing to walk home, walk from their car to their home and back again, right? I think that's one of the determining factors that sets how big a zone might be.
Mhm.
And then you get into the issue of boundary effect. So for instance, somebody who's in the middle of a zone can go in multiple directions to find additional parking, north, south, east, west, a full 360, right? Whereas somebody who's on a boundary, they only have 180 degrees of parking selection, right?
But somebody's got to be on a boundary.
Pardon me? Well, I know, but again, so here's where maybe technology comes in. If we've got a service company with a lot that's using a license plate reader, then where it's all machine done, is just a database lookup the number and where you're supposed to park. We can have overlapping zones. Do you see what I mean?
I'm thinking about it.
So
if
again,
we're on a boundary,
person had to resolve this, if a person had to resolve this, it'd be a lot of work on the enforcement side. But if it's simply done by the computer and the license plate reader and lookup, then yeah, this person's okay. If it's just a database lookup.
overlap by a block.
Christian, did you have it? You had your hand raised?
Yes. So, I mean, yeah, I think the idea of zone is, in my mind, what will make, some will make sense you know, that like the sample that I gave you, you would do an average. The people, you know, will have somewhat a number of parking that they could choose from that zone, because sometimes, you know, depending on the conditions of that area, there's going to be streets that they're going to have no parking. There's going to be streets that are going to be tight, but there's going to be streets that are parking available. And, you know, and that's a fine line to dance on, you know, so I'm not saying, you know, that's going to be easy either. But the other question, I mean, the other, I guess, observation I have, how do you issue permit? You know, do you go by how many households are in the house? It's like parents with 2 teenagers and they need to drive, or is it just a straightforward max capacity of 2 or 3 permits? So, you know, that's another criteria to think about it if we're not going to consider the capacity of the street.
Okay, thank you.
I'm looking back at Darius's San Francisco map that he forwarded, and it doesn't look like it's a walking distance zone. I think the zones were maybe
Okay.
decided to simplify issuing permits because they're bigger than the distance you want to walk.
Okay. All right.
And this all the way over to Lyon, you know, further there.
Mhm.
For example.
So I guess, what does the committee think? Do we even need zones in Brisbane? Or is there an advantage, a disadvantage that you think, Linda?
That's why I had my hand up.
Okay.
If I live on Tulare and I want to go hang out with my friend on Alvarado Street, how does that affect my parking? Will my permit be useful? I mean, this is a small community where a lot of people know each other, and sometimes I'm invited to a gathering on Humboldt Road. There's very little parking around the property, and it's a long distance for me to walk from one end of town to the other. And how do we deal with community interaction with zone? I don't see it working.
Another
I mean, but if I might offer a comment on that, I think that probably falls under guest park, right? Because it will also be a little counterproductive to build, you know, to build a system for every condition. You know, that's just not, I mean, feasible. It's difficult also to distinguish if your guest is a Brisbane resident or from out of town. But then you also have that time frame. You know, I guess people could park on the street until a certain time, and then the enforcement kicks in, maybe.
that was
I
my
don't know.
comment. In the residential, the problem time, as we studied it, was evenings. So
Mhm.
the commercial permits tended to be 9 to 6 when those businesses were open, I guess, was kind of the time range. But are the residential ones more of an evening? Like you need that permit to park from 5 p.m. or, you know, I don't think we would want Linda to have to get a guest permit to go
Right.
have dinner on Humboldt, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, there's something there. This is a very social community, and you never know where you're going to end up sometimes, at whose house, what street. And because it's so hilly, it makes it difficult for someone over 65 to walk that far, and then walk back home. And I see that as a problem, especially if someone has disabilities or something like that, can't walk. It's something we need to look at. I hate to just gloss over that. I really want to look at that as, how are we going to park in front of our friend's house if, in any park?
Maybe a
And as
way
you're
to,
talking, Linda, that
go ahead, Darius.
but no, I guess I was as you guys were talking about this, Linda, specifically as you were mentioning this, I kind of came back to the enforcement side as well. I mean, is this also going to be right? Like just because you're parking there for someone has to call your car in and say, hey, person parking in my neighborhood then, or is it maybe part of the enforcement would be constant patrolling? But I wonder how much of that would just be, you know, if it's not like a huge nuisance or if it's not being called on, would that be a big concern or not? I guess yeah, it kind of in my mind it ties back to enforcement also. So it's kind of the spaghetti again, sort of
Yeah.
everything.
A thought I had on my mind is that this would be overnight parking permit. Isn't that kind of really the problem for all of it? Most people, you come home, came home from work before COVID and couldn't find a place to park. Isn't that, is it, I mean, is that the majority of the problem you guys think or not, or
I'm not sure.
Christian?
So I think definitely overnight and maybe weekend, you know.
Weekends
because
too,
people are
okay.
home, yeah.
You know, that factors into what the cost of the program would be too, right? If we've got the service company patrolling, if they are constantly patrolling the city 24/7, that would have a much different cost than if somebody has to do the city on a once through at starting at 10 p.m. or something, you know? And these are difficult
Another
questions.
thought that crosses my mind is that the baby boomer generation's getting older, and every now and then a friend will have
Okay.
surgery. Yeah, turn it up. If someone like that I care about lives somewhere in town away from me, and they've just had surgery and need me to spend the night, check on them throughout the night or give medication or something like that. How does that work with the parking? I mean, it is spaghetti again. It's we need to noodle out how do we deal with these circumstances of being social or being helpful? I'm not sure. I'm a little, I don't want to recommend anything to the council that is going to create problems for people other than people who don't use what they've got in terms of stuffed garages.
Or 10 cars. Or 15 cars.
Mm-hmm.
Some people want. Karen, what's our stopping time? Are we 8 o'clock or 8:30?
I mean, we used to be 8, but we never finished by 8. But we do have a couple other things, you know, to wrap up on them.
Yeah. I was wanting to leave time for the other things. Maybe this is a good time to stop. The committee agrees to stop our discussion, pause our discussion next time on issues. And maybe in the interim, all of us can go. Tomas, could you distribute this to us again? And actually send us the paper document, the hard copy in an email again. And then we can go through it and do, like, I think Linda suggested, ranking it, putting our thoughts between now and the next meeting. Does that sound like a plan, guys?
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. All right. Why don't we move on then to, I know we wanted to have Tomas do an intro to SharePoint for us, or a little tutorial. Karen, when would you think is the right point to do that? Would that be now, or go to staff updates and do it after that, or
Yeah, I would call it staff updates.
tutorial / okay.
Staff updates would make sense, yeah.
Okay, all right. There's no new business, so why don't we move on to that right now?
Is there anything else, Tomas, you can think of? Staff updates.
You guys,
one-
have you guys seen Sierra Point Parkway out there? The new work, the road work going on?
I drove on it last night.
Yeah, so yeah, that's underway. I think it should be finished in middle of July. So coming up, I think they're gonna come back next week. So yeah, we're one of my first big projects. So yeah, really happy to see it happen.
Come back and
Amazing.
slurry seal, and then that has to cure, and then they'll pave, so it'll take a few more weeks to wrap it up. On the San Mateo County TA's agenda, I believe for tomorrow. Thought you'd remember that, Tomas.
Oh no, and
The shuttle stops. We were awarded the grant, for the shuttle stop.
Hey, fantastic!
I think it was not oversubscribed. I think they gave everybody who applied money, so it was great. You know, these local ones are nice.
Great work. Thank you, Karen. Great work.
Yeah,
Thank you.
that's very
And Tomas,
happy
yeah,
news.
thank you.
Yeah, that was a tough one. Kind of holding our breath on that one, but that's wonderful.
How
Thank
many
you.
stops can we build? Do you know? Do you have an idea?
Yeah, we estimated that. Tomas, was it? So it wasn't, all of them would not get shelters, but we have to do some ADA improvements. So if there's a bench on the sidewalk, you need to make a pad behind the sidewalk so there's still
Yeah.
passing room for a wheelchair. So that costs some money. I think it was 10 of the stops in Crocker Park. Some of them are close together, so some of them either didn't get anything or only got bench.
Okay.
I don't remember exactly how many shelters was in that total cost. And as you saw, it took us a while to figure out which shelter and to get the quotes and to get it approved. But the one on at 140 Valley was ordered in January. And as you guys know, it just came in a few weeks ago. So
It looks fantastic. It looks absolutely terrific. And people are using it. I was
Yeah.
coming home last night and they're in the drizzle. They're under the
Yeah.
cover. It's great.
what it's supposed to do. It's gonna take some time before we see them all.
Okay. Okay. Wonderful news.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Anything else? Okay, we're on to SharePoint then, I guess.
yeah, it was going
Maybe-
really slow. So I made sure to bring it up while we're still talking. But so yeah, it's for most of the things that will basically concern us is everything that is posted in these folders I was just looking at. Or it shows up right here, but to keep it as simple as possible, really, if you start here at the home page, and if you just go to documents, and then that'll take you to this page with the folders. So I'll click it to show you.
And this was the link that we originally got in an email from Ingrid, which you can bookmark up at the top, so then you can always find it quickly.
Okay.
I hadn't done that, so. We need to upgrade your city laptop once.
All right.
Are we under AT&T's lack of internet problem?
Oh, because he's at home too, so.
Did you read the final on what was going on there, Patrick?
I think it was a rodent ate the fiber optic. Yum, yum.
Okay, yeah, so here, this is just what happens when you click documents, which is everything you see on the home page. Obviously there's options to upload new folders, upload new files. That'd probably mostly be for me though, as far as we get more information and more data. But yeah, all this stuff right here, like recycle bin, you can pretty much ignore. Site contact, I mean, I clicked on them, there's nothing really substantial as far as sharing information. And yeah, so I would primarily just focus on this document tab right here in the home tab, and anything that is in the document tab is also in the home. So they all kind of lead to the same spot. And yeah, that's pretty much it. There's no way for us to chat, which I know is the goal. So that's good. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
Tomas, could you show, I envision this and that any of us can post, upload documents, any of us can create a folder or a subfolder. So maybe Tomas, maybe you could just show us that, how to create a folder, and then if you're already in a folder, how to create a subfolder inside that folder if somebody wanted to do it?
Okay, yeah. So yeah, you would be on this document page, the one right here on that you see on your left hand side. To make a new
Mhm.
folder, you would just start with new, and then it kind of gives you an option. So depending on what your system is, it might just bring up an Excel sheet if you want to work straight from here. But you would just hit right here on folder,
Okay.
then and then folder name. And then I believe it should work the exact same way going in. Let's just go into a folder and try to make a folder in there.
So when you open it, when you connect, or when you click on new, it will automatically open it or create it in the folder you're in. You have already
exactly.
opened.
So yeah, this
Okay.
document one is sort of like the home base of folders, and then you would just hit new. And so now we're in this example folder, and you can kind of navigate where you are. You see this thread. You were just in documents, and now we're in the example folder. And if I want, I can make another one, make another folder, and then same idea. And then to upload anything, you would just use this upload feature right here, and it'll bring you a prompt of where to look for. And then, I mean, you'll look through your computer, and then this would be in the example one folder. And then if I went in there, I could obviously upload folders in the same way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Very good.
Can you show where the parking data is? Oh, you're uploading folders, so go ahead, do that.
How do we go backwards? How would I, so we're down in a subfolder. How do I go back up? How do I go back up?
This darkened folder right here, you'll see that it's black, and this one behind it to the left is gray. This means you're essentially, and there's an arrow leading into example. This just essentially means you were in documents and now you're in example. So to go backwards, I mean, you could either just press this, or you just hit your back arrow, and it should take you back to the same spot.
Okay.
And then you're back here on documents.
Okay.
Hey, Tomas, can you I don't have access to it. Can you show where the people, when you go to the main one and see the share button to see who has access to it?
Let's see if you have access. There's 11 members, right? Yeah, it says you should be in here. I could just resend the link to you. I think it was sent out a while back, but I can just forward that again. But yeah, you're in here.
Because I'm in it and I don't see any folders.
And so, and when you just go home, when you just go straight to SharePoint, you don't see like this icon, this complete streets, anything like that. I know we were kind of having I was having trouble with that as well, and I swear I just all of a sudden appeared. So I can get back to you with an answer on that, because I think Karen was having trouble with it at one point as well. But yeah, I'll make a note to follow up with you on that. Make sure you get access.
So
okay, thank you.
If there's a document on here that someone wants to download, could you show us how to do that?
Yeah.
Tomas, I think I was in OneDrive and not SharePoint, and I can find it. And I don't know, Christian, make sure that you're not in the one that you created that was with the personal emails.
No, this is the city one.
Okay.
And yeah, so for instance, this would be a good one to download. I'll send it out anyways. But the one we were just talking about, the with all the parking permit options.
Yeah.
So I just click on it. Then you see download up here, and you could also, it's also a convenient way to share it.
Oh, I see. Okay. So you need to open the document to download.
You know, I think I might have done an extra step, and you could still do it from back there. Let me see. But yeah, clicking on it, you can't go wrong. Let me see.
Yep.
Yep. I put these little dots.
What about the 3 dots?
Yeah, that's what I think. Oh no.
No.
Oh wait, here it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah. You see download. Wait, are you guys seeing yourself?
So I guess
I'm in. Thank you.
we should be careful not to delete anything, right?
No, but yeah. Also, yeah. If if that does happen, though, you can let me know because all this is also saved on our own city drive. Like, so I have like this.
Okay, so there's a backup. Okay, great. Is there a way to have an automatic, when somebody posts something, is there a way to have an automatic notification sent out to the committee members that a new document's been posted and, you know, with the link to that document?
I don't know. I'm assuming we're definitely not getting that. I've been posting things and there's been no. But yeah, I can look into that. As far as I know, no.
Okay.
Good question. Maybe there's a way to set it up, but
Okay. Any questions for Tomas on using this, guys?
Darius might have a question, but he had problems, so he's listening in. So
Oh, yeah. Okay. I don't see him on screen.
Oh, he said he's
yeah,
listening.
he can probably text if he needs.
oh, he needs to be.
Oh, he needs to be elevated.
Oh, he's
to
not a panelist.
Oh, okay.
But
He
no
says he
question.
has no questions.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
I have a question. Has everyone been able to set up and do their, at least log into their city account? Have we all been able to do that?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, okay, good, good.
Oh,
Darius,
so we're using that to email you guys.
Yeah.
Are we, Tomas?
Sorry, what was that?
forgot. I might have just used the old one.
Darius, you've been able to log in, I assume, right? Yeah, okay, I assume. The only thing I would recommend, the password that was given to me was just really simple. And I'm sure everybody is the same. And get the IT guy's name. He sent out a thing on, you can come into City Hall. There's a kiosk there that you can go in and change your password. You have to do it in City Hall. I have not done mine yet, but I'm going to, and I would recommend everyone change it to a more secure password and then record that somewhere so that, you know, because the reset is not like we normally reset. You can't just do it from home.
And right now, City Hall is open Mondays and Thursdays 9 to 4, Wednesday 9 to 7.
Okay,
Okay.
great. Anything else for to be looked at on committee member or staff members or committee update? Anything? I do have a question, Karen. For the past week, there have been car counting tubes out on Bayshore, first on the southbound side, out by the 101 freeway exit, and then on the northbound side. It's in our city side. I don't think it's South City's area. I think it was the Brisbane. You
Oh,
don't know.
Maybe maybe a developer. So south where you're
You know where the freeway exit comes off, the Bayshore freeway exit, where the bicycle
the green.
interchange we talked about, just north of there is where they were located. So I think that's in Brisbane, not South City.
No idea. No idea.
All right.
Yeah, I'm working from home, so I hadn't seen. I can ask, but I actually don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a
That'd be-
developer.
And then there's been a police car out there a couple of days this week, parked on the northbound side, kind of across from the trailer park or so. I'm sure they're maybe back to looking at feeds and stuff. I hope so. Okay.
Mobile home park. I'm going to bug you about that. I'm going to bug
Yeah.
everybody.
Okay, anything else to discuss tonight? All right, could I then have a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Second,
Make a motion. I second the motion.
okay, acclamation, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
It's really good to see everybody.
Good to see
Thank
you,
you.
everybody, yes. Thank you very much, all. We'll see you next month.
Right.
Take care.
Everybody.